You ever look at what's happening in the world and it all just feels kind of chaotic, unpredictable? Well, what if I told you there's a surprisingly consistent pattern, an 80-year cycle that's been shaping things for centuries? If we get a handle on this cycle of rise and fall, it gives us a really powerful way to make sense of the headlines. Okay, so let's dig into this thing, this power cycle. It's basically a repeating pattern that helps put all the noise and chaos of today's news into a much bigger and frankly more understandable context. So let's start with a simple question. Has any global reserve currency ever lasted forever? The short answer, nope, not even close. When you look back, the story of global money isn't one of permanence. It's a fascinating and kind of predictable cycle of rise and fall. I mean, look at this. For the last 400 years, the pattern has been remarkably consistent. Each dominant currency gets about 70 to 100 years in a spotlight. A nation gets ahead through trade and new ideas, like the Dutch with their incredible shipping fleets. Then they lock in that power through finance, like Great Britain did with London. But eventually, things like debt, conflict, and new competition start to wear them down, which sets the stage for the next big player. And that, of course, brings us to the big question, right? If this cycle is a real thing, where are we right now? Well, the US dollar officially took the crown back in 1944. A little math tells you that was 80 years ago, which puts us squarely in the later and usually more turbulent part of this historical pattern. And what's really fascinating is that this isn't just some theory someone cooked up recently. Historians have had a name and a whole framework for this exact pattern for a long time. They call it hegemony. Hegemony. It sounds like a fancy word, but the idea is simple. It's not just about being rich or having a giant army. It's about being the country that gets to set the rules of the game for everybody else. It's the power to shape the whole global system, both political and economic, in a way that benefits you. And a true hegemon, a real global power, has to have both sides of this coin. Your economic strength pays for your military power, and that military power protects your trade routes and your economic interests. It's a loop where each side makes the other stronger. So here's the nutshell version. It usually kicks off with a massive, world-changing war that basically hits the reset button. A new power rises from the rubble, has its golden age, but then, its lead starts to fade as other countries catch up. This isn't really a failure, it's just the natural rhythm of the cycle. And just so you know, we're not making this up, we can see this exact cycle play out over and over again for the last 500 years. We're talking different empires, different currencies, but it's the same basic story of rise and decline. This is a perfect example. For ages, Venice was the king of trade between the East and West, all through the Mediterranean. But then, as you can see on these maps, Portugal found a way to sail around Africa, and just like that, they pulled the world's economic center of gravity right out from under Venice. Game changer. And this table here lays out the whole sequence for us. After a huge war, Venice gives way to the Netherlands. Then, after the Napoleonic Wars, the Netherlands gets passed by Britain. And then, of course, after 2 world wars, Britain's time is up and the United States steps in. You can just see the pattern playing out like clockwork. This quote from Joshua Goldstein really nails the main lesson from 500 years of this stuff. No matter how powerful, how untouchable a global power seems, its moment of overwhelming predominance is always temporary. Okay, so with all that history as our guide, let's apply this model to right now. Where does the United States and the dollar fit into this cycle today? These global powers tend to move through 5 pretty distinct phases. The early stages are all about growth, making stuff, and trading. But those later stages, 4 and 5, that's when the warning lights start to flash, as the country's finances start to create stress, both at home and abroad. And this number, 120%, it says a lot. Right now, U.S. federal debt is over 120% of its entire economic output for a year. If you look at history, that level of debt is a classic sign that a power is shifting from that financial boom of stage 4 into the serious strain of stage 5. And it's not just the debt. We're seeing other signs of stress on the system, right? Huge government deficits, using financial sanctions as a weapon, and let's be honest, a world that feels like it's fracturing into different camps. Now, this isn't about predicting some sudden collapse, but it is about recognizing that the system is clearly under strain. So all this brings us to the most important question of all. What's next? The historical model tells us a change is coming, but it might not be a simple case of one country taking another's place. So instead of a new king of the hill, the future is probably going to be multipolar. Just imagine a world with a few different competing financial zones, one built around the dollar, yeah, but another around the euro, and another around the Chinese yuan, with other things like gold or even digital currencies playing a bigger role. When you look at the different ways this could go, analysts think a slow, gradual slide into this multipolar world is the most likely path, about a 50-50 shot. But you can't ignore the other options. A sudden, messy financial crisis that speeds everything up, or, on the flip side, maybe a new wave of American innovation in things like AI that keeps the dollar on top for longer than anyone expects. This quote right here really captures the most important thing to get about these huge, slow-moving changes. They don't happen all at once. It's more like a slow erosion that can go on for years, even decades, until it's not slow anymore. A tipping point gets hit, and then change happens a lot faster than anyone was ready for. So, at the end of the day, understanding this 80-year cycle isn't really about trying to pinpoint the exact day the world changes. It's about being prepared. The really important question isn't, will the system change, but rather, how do we prepare our money, our businesses, and just our thinking for a world that's becoming financially multipolar? That's the real challenge ahead.